My colleague is trying to sabotage me to take the managerial position. My name is Brandon Ellis, and if there's one thing I've learned from this story, it's that the enemy you should fear most is the one who knows how to smile while cutting your throat. Trust me, you'll regret skipping this story. So before you sit back and listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Ethan's Way. Now get in the mood to listen to this story because it might be the ultimate sweet revenge. It started with the small things unseen, almost forgettable. A team meeting I didn't know had been rescheduled. A client proposal I supposedly didn't respond to. A group brainstorm I arrived late for only to be met with tight-lipped stares and Jeremy already leading the table. Jeremy Cross, my coworker, my peer, and as I would soon realize, my competitor in every sense of the word. We'd started at the agency around the same time, both eager, both quietly ambitious. But where I focused on process and delivery, Jeremy lived for appearances. He could charm a client out of their own budget bluff through a missed deadline with just a grin and a fresh suit. For a while it worked. We made a good team meet behind the scenes, him in the spotlight. But over the past few months, I began noticing a shift, subtle like a rug being pulled half an inch at a time. An internal deck I'd created was suddenly overwritten in the system. Meeting invites I swore I'd received never reached my inbox. One morning, I walked into the conference room and saw Jeremy presenting my campaign brief to the regional director as if it were his own. He winked at me when he caught me staring. I didn't say anything that day. I told myself I was being paranoid, that maybe I'd missed something, miscommunicated, overlooked. But the more I tried to explain it away, the more it kept happening. In the hallway, I overheard two interns whispering Brandon's slipping lately. In our Monday stand-up, Jeremy casually dropped in, "I think Brandon's been overloaded. I can take that client off his plate." And no one disagreed. I told myself it was just coincidence, a string of misunderstandings. But when I looked closer, the patterns became impossible to ignore. There was the email chain with the Peterson account. I had written a full campaign proposal 3 days before Jeremy replied, all with a suspiciously similar outline, forwarding it to the client and copying the whole leadership team. My name wasn't mentioned once, or the Slack message where I'd shared an idea with our internal team, only to hear it pitched in our next client meeting word for word by Jeremy while I sat there blinking at the screen. Then came the missed deadline. Jeremy told our boss Paul that I hadn't delivered a crucial ad asset by end of week. I'd sent it in a shared folder. But when I opened the link, nothing. The file was gone. I never saw it. Jeremy said, his voice smooth. I knew I had uploaded it. I knew. But the timestamp was gone. The file had been deleted and I had no proof. Don't worry, Jeremy added with a smile. I threw something together last minute. Hopefully it'll do. Paul nodded like Jeremy had just saved the agency. That night, I sat in my car in the parking lot long after everyone else had left. It wasn't just ambition. It wasn't just competition. Jeremy was sabotaging me, systematically, patiently, like a snake curling around a limb, squeezing slowly enough to keep its victim still. And I didn't know who to tell. If I went to HR, it would sound petty like office politics. If I told Paul, he'd think I was blaming someone else for my own mistakes. But something told me this wasn't random. There was a plan, a purpose. I remembered what Paul had casually mentioned in passing just the week before. We'll be naming a new department manager by the end of the quarter. Big changes coming. It clicked. Jeremy wanted that position, and I was the only thing in his way. I looked out the window at the empty floor of our office building, glass panels glowing in a soft blue hue. Chairs turned slightly as if people had just gotten up, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I belonged. Not because I wasn't good at my job. I was. Not because I was failing, but because someone had decided to rewrite the story behind my back, one missing file at a time. I drove home that night not angry, but cold, quiet. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and created a folder, titled it J Cross Moves. I didn't know exactly what I'd fill it with, but I knew I was done playing nice. The next morning, I walked into the office with a smile on my face, one that felt like armor. No one knew it yet, but a line had been drawn. I wasn't going to wait for someone to save me. Jeremy was already at his desk typing with his usual relaxed confidence. He looked up and gave me that fake little nod just enough to say, "We're friends, right?" I nodded back, game on. The week ahead was chaotic. We had a major pitch for the Henderson account, a national campaign that could land us 6 figures in a long-term contract. Naturally, Jeremy and I were co-leads, or rather, I was the lead on paper. In practice, Jeremy made every move to eclipse me. He'd pull interns into his office to revise parts of the strategy I'd written. He'd casually forget to loop me into key prep meetings. He'd send preview decks directly to Paul without even consulting me. When I confronted him, I kept my tone neutral. "Hey, just a heads up. I wasn't in the loop on that client preview. Was that intentional?" He smiled. "Oh man, totally my bad. Thought you were copied in. I'll double check next time." He wouldn't. We both knew it. But this time I wasn't just letting it slide. That folder I created, J-Cross Moves, was starting to fill up. I began screen recording everything, my outgoing emails, Slack threads, server uploads. I took photos of the whiteboards after strategy sessions and quietly tracked version history on shared files. And then I caught him red-handed. It was Thursday. I stayed late to finalize the Henderson presentation. The slides were clean, tight, precise days of work, condensed into a clear, persuasive pitch. I saved it to the team folder. The next morning the file was gone. Just gone. I checked the version history. Someone had deleted it at 11:46 p.m. The system tagged the user Jcross. I smiled. I restored the file, added a tracker to it that would notify me of any edits, and then saved a hard copy to my desktop and cloud. Then I created a second copy and titled it Final Pitch Henderson edited by Jcross. Just bait. Sure enough, 20 minutes later, I got a ping. Your document, Final Pitch Henderson edited by Jcross, was opened by Jcross. He was watching. He knew I knew, but he wasn't going to stop. Friday came, and the entire agency gathered in the main conference room for the Henderson pitch. I walked in early, checked the setup, and ensured everything was synced. I even triple backed up the presentation file to the cloud on my phone. Jeremy came in 5 minutes before the clients arrived, holding a cappuccino like he hadn't sabotaged the presentation the night before. Paul gave us the floor. Jeremy stood up beside me and smiled confidently at the clients. And then he said something I hadn't expected. "We've actually adjusted a few slides from Brandon's draft. Just wanted to tighten some of the numbers. Nothing major." "What?" He clicked forward, and there it was. A completely butchered version of the strategy. Timelines inflated, budgets reduced, creative concepts altered to sound more disruptive. I turned to him mid-presentation and said quietly, "This isn't the file we agreed on." He didn't blink. "It's cleaner, trust me." I looked at Paul. He was watching me, not Jeremy. When the presentation ended, I could tell the clients were lukewarm. Not angry, just confused. It didn't feel tight, didn't feel coherent. It felt improvised. Afterward, Paul called me into his office, closed the door, sat down with a sigh. "I've noticed some inconsistencies in your recent projects," he said. I stayed silent. He continued, "Jeremy's been stepping in a lot, cleaning up things. I'm not sure if it's a workload issue or if you're getting distracted, but..." I held up my phone. "Before you finish, I'd like to show you something." I played a screen recording from the night before. Jeremy's account accessing and deleting the original file. Then I pulled up the version history logs, the timestamps, the restored original, then the fake copy, the bait. Paul leaned back in his chair. "Holy." "Yeah," I said, "that's what I've been dealing with." There was a long pause. "You have more of this?" he asked. I nodded. "Weeks worth." He stared at his desk, the weight of it setting in. "I'll need to escalate this." I stood, just wanted to set the record straight. As I left his office, I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired, but something had shifted. No more whispers, no more gaslighting. Now there was a record. Jeremy hadn't just tried to sabotage my work. He tried to rewrite my competence. And now I had the receipts. I expected fallout. I expected HR emails, meetings, backpedaling, maybe even an apology. What I didn't expect was silence. The Monday after I turned over the recordings to Paul, the office atmosphere felt oddly muted. I walked in and felt eyes on me, but no one said anything. Jeremy was at his desk like nothing had happened, typing away, smiling. He didn't even flinch when I passed by. That unsettled me more than I'd like to admit. By noon, I still hadn't heard from Paul. No HR, no follow-up, no update. It was like I'd thrown a grenade, and everyone just kept sipping their coffee waiting to see if it was a dud. At 2:47 p.m., I finally got the message. "Brandon HR needs a brief follow-up. Swing by at 3:30. I walked in expecting Jeremy to already be there, red-faced, cornered, exposed. Instead, it was just Laura from HR seated calmly with a neutral smile. She offered me water, closed the door. "Thanks for your patience," she said. "We reviewed the materials you submitted. It's clear there were procedural lapses." Procedural lapses. She continued. We've spoken to Jeremy. He denies any malicious intent, says he was stepping in to help finish a file that you didn't complete. I blinked. You saw the deletion log, I said, the edited timestamps, the bait file. I did, she said quickly. But Jeremy claims it was an accident, says he thought it was a draft. I leaned forward, trying to stay calm. So, what now? Laura gave me a politician's answer. We're still gathering context. Until then, we encourage both parties to maintain professionalism and avoid direct conflict. Just like that. Like it was a misunderstanding. Like someone hadn't actively tried to ruin my credibility. When I left the HR office, I didn't feel vindicated. I felt cornered. That night, I called my friend Colin. He'd left the agency 2 years ago. I'm not crazy, right? I asked, pacing my apartment. Absolutely not, he said. Jeremy's a parasite. Always has been. I exhaled. I gave them proof. HR still played it neutral. Colin chuckled bitterly. That's their default. They don't act until it becomes a liability. Should I go public? I asked. With what? My file folder, the screen recordings, everything. He paused. Not yet. Not unless you're ready to burn the whole thing down. I stared at my computer screen, at the folder labeled J Cross Moves. Burning it all down sounded easy, too easy. But deep down, I knew this was more than personal now. This was about culture, about what a company will tolerate when someone's good at kissing the right asses and smiling at the right moments. And Jeremy, he was very good at both. The next day I went back in like nothing happened. Jeremy passed me in the hallway, gave me a mock surprised look. Oh, hey man, HR said it was all sorted. A water under the bridge, right? I didn't flinch, just stared at him. Of course, water under the bridge. But in my head, I was already planning the next step, because HR wouldn't act unless they had to. And Jeremy, he wasn't done yet. That afternoon I got an anonymous email. Subject, check your team chat. Timestamp 10:34 a.m. No name, no signature. I opened the chat log between Jeremy and one of the junior creatives. There it was. Jeremy Brandon's clueless. If he drops the ball again, Paul's gonna have no choice. Junior creative. You think he'll quit? Jeremy. He won't need to. I've got this locked. I screenshotted it, saved it, added it to the folder. Then I messaged the junior creative directly. Hey, mind stopping by my desk later? When she arrived, she looked nervous. She was young, mid-20s, talented, and clearly torn. I'm not here to get you in trouble, I said gently. But I saw the chat log, and I need to ask, how long has Jeremy been doing this? She hesitated, then a while. Just me. She shook her head. Before you, it was Clara. Before Clara, I think it was Miles. Did anyone report it? Some tried, she said, but it always gets brushed off. Jeremy's close with Paul, and he knows how to frame things. I nodded. Would you be willing to speak to HR? She looked terrified. Not on record, she said. I can't risk it. I didn't push, but the truth was clear. I wasn't Jeremy's first target. I was just the one who pushed back. And now, I wasn't just defending myself. I was exposing a pattern. If you were in this situation, would you forgive or take revenge? Comment below to let us know. The company announced the promotion cycle on a Friday morning, 3 open positions including the most coveted, 1 department manager strategy division. And of course, my name was listed, right next to Jeremy's. It was no surprise, really. We were both senior enough, both proven in our own ways. But the announcement hit differently now. Before, it would have been an exciting opportunity, a milestone. Now, it felt like a fight to reclaim my own reputation. That weekend, I didn't sleep much. I kept replaying the months in my head, every lie Jeremy had slipped into a conversation, every time he smiled while twisting the knife. The way the team looked at me now, cautious, unsure, like I might implode or disappear. I knew I was at a tipping point. If I didn't act soon, the next accidental mistake could be career-ending. So I started writing. A document, not for HR, not for revenge, but for me. The timeline. I laid it all out chronologically, every incident, every deleted file, every chat transcript. I added screenshots, linked video recordings, and matched each one with time-stamped Slack messages or email threads. I made it unignorable. By Sunday night, it was over 40 pages long. I wasn't sure what I'd do with it yet, but just writing it made me feel something I hadn't felt in weeks. Clarity. On Monday, Paul pulled both Jeremy and me into a brief alignment meeting about the promotion process. Paul opened, "This won't be formal yet, but leadership wants to see how both of you handle this week's Henderson debrief. It'll weigh heavily into the final decision." Jeremy nodded, completely unfazed. I stayed quiet. After the meeting, Jeremy followed me out into the hallway and clapped me on the shoulder. "May the best man win," he said with that same half grin. I turned to him, looked him dead in the eye. "Oh, I intend to." That was the moment his smile faltered, just for a second. Tuesday came. The debrief was scheduled for 10:00 a.m. All team leads, Paul and upper management. My job was to present our campaign outcomes, data metrics, and strategic insights. Jeremy's job was to help field questions and represent creative execution. I came in early as always, but this time I came armed. I had 2 files saved to the cloud, one labeled Henderson Official Presentation and one labeled Henderson Pitch History.pdf. The first was for the team. The second was my failsafe. We started the meeting strong. I walked through each part of the campaign, showing how our strategy evolved from proposal to execution. The numbers were good. Real conversions, meaningful lift, strong client feedback. And then Jeremy spoke. I'd just like to add that much of the visual concepting pivoted last minute. We didn't want to overwhelm the client, so I simplified some of the original elements, he said smoothly. Simplified, he meant butchered. Paul nodded as if that were true. Then I clicked to the next slide. I had inserted a timeline, a clear layout showing our proposal dates, campaign rounds, and file versions. And then I said, just for transparency, I've included version comparisons for the leadership team. I watched Jeremy's posture stiffen. A senior VP leaned forward. "You mean a before and after?" I clicked again. Side-by-side images filled the screen, one with the original client-approved visuals and one with Jeremy's altered slides. The differences were glaring. I let the room sit in silence for a second. Then I added, "And here's the version we submitted to the client tracked back to our server edits, time-stamped and tagged. No accusation, just facts." Jeremy shifted. While we were working fast, Brandon and I were aligned on that pivot. I turned to him. "No, you changed those after I submitted the approved version, without notice." The room got quiet. Paul cleared his throat. "We'll review the full logs after the meeting." I nodded, "Already sent to your inbox." The meeting ended 5 minutes early, and just like that, I'd flipped the narrative. Not through anger, not through yelling, just by exposing the truth calmly, one receipt at a time. That afternoon, I got a short email from Paul. "Thanks for your transparency today. Leadership is reviewing your material. Let's touch base by Thursday." No mention of Jeremy, but I didn't need it, because the silence was different now. This wasn't the silence of dismissal. It was the silence that follows when a story has changed and people need time to absorb it. And for once, Jeremy didn't stop by my desk, didn't clap me on the shoulder, didn't flash that smug grin. He just stayed quiet. And I knew he felt the shift too. 2 days after the Henderson debrief, I found myself being watched. Not by Paul, not by HR, by everyone else. The copywriters who usually nodded but kept to themselves now lingered near my desk with small talk. Designers who rarely looked up from their screens gave me curious glances. The energy had shifted, subtle but real. For once, I wasn't the one in question. Jeremy was. That Thursday afternoon, Paul called me in, alone. His office was quiet, doors shut, blinds half drawn. He gestured to the seat across from him. We finished reviewing the logs and materials, he began. I stayed silent, hands resting calmly on my lap. I'll admit, I didn't expect it. The depth, the consistency. You documented everything. I had to, I said. No one was listening before. Paul nodded slowly, almost like he was still catching up to his own realization. We spoke with Jeremy. He's denying intent, but he can't explain the access logs or edits. The digital trail is undeniable. Is he being terminated? No, Paul said. Not yet. He's been removed from his managerial candidacy. I didn't say anything. Paul continued. But I'll be honest with you, Brandon. This put the agency in a difficult spot. Leadership doesn't like internal conflict made public. It was never public, I said. I kept it internal. You chose whether to escalate it. There was a pause. You're right, Paul said, and for what it's worth, I respect how you handled it. He reached for a folder on his desk. This is an offer, he said. Managerial position, strategy division, effective next quarter. We want you to lead. I looked at the folder but didn't reach for it yet. On what condition, I asked. Paul blinked. Excuse me. There's always a condition. He leaned back slightly, weighing his words. We'd appreciate discretion. Regarding Jeremy, we'll manage his reassignment quietly. No need to stir the pot further. I stared at the folder for another long beat, then finally took it not as a gift, but as a document I had earned. I stood, one condition of my own. Paul raised an eyebrow. Go on. I want the authority to restructure the team. No more protected circles, no more favorites shielding each other. If I'm managing, I do it clean. Paul gave a quiet chuckle. You've changed. No, I said, you're just seeing me now. And with that, I left his office. Jeremy was at his desk when I walked past. He didn't look up, didn't say a word. For the first time, he looked small. Not the smooth operator, not the golden boy. Just a man who'd bet too much on people never paying attention. I thought that would feel like a victory, but it didn't. It felt like closure. The next week was filled with transition meetings, HR updates, leadership briefings. I sat in rooms I'd never been invited to before, saw the company from the other side of the glass, and suddenly it all made sense. Why people like Jeremy lasted so long, why systems protect those who look the part. It wasn't just about talent, it was about visibility, narratives, who could spin a story fast enough to make others believe it. And I was finally spinning mine. One of the younger strategists, Megan, caught me after a meeting. I just wanted to say she began a little nervous thank you for standing up. We've all seen what Jeremy's done, but no one ever had proof. You did? I said quietly. You just weren't believed. She looked stunned. I smiled. That ends now. At the official announcement meeting, Paul stood at the front of the team and introduced me as the new department lead. Applause followed, some polite, some genuinely warm. Jeremy wasn't there. He'd been quietly reassigned to a satellite account, still with the agency, but no longer in the room where decisions were made. As I took the floor for the first time as manager, I looked around at the people who had watched this unfold in silence. Some had doubted me, some had whispered, but now they were looking at me with something different. Not fear, not awe, respect. And that's something Jeremy never earned no matter how much he tried to steal. It didn't take long to realize that promotion didn't mean peace. If anything, it brought a new kind of pressure. Eyes watching every move I made, waiting to see if I'd become what Jeremy had been, or if I'd failed trying to prove I was something different. And Jeremy, though he'd been removed from the managerial race, he wasn't gone. He was still around, still smiling in meetings, still trading passive remarks with people in the hallway. He kept his claws tucked in now, but I could feel the tension in the air whenever he entered a room, like static before a lightning strike. I didn't trust that silence, not after everything. So I did something I never thought I would. I invited him to lunch. He was clearly surprised when I walked over to his desk. Got time to eat, I asked, voice level. Jeremy hesitated, then gave a little shrug. Sure. We walked down to a place 2 blocks from the office. Neutral territory, a quiet booth. He didn't even pretend to start small talk. So what's this, he asked. Some kind of olive branch? No, I said, just clarity. He raised an eyebrow. You've already won, Brandon. No need to rub it in. I didn't come here to gloat, I said. I came here to say something you should have heard from someone a long time ago. He leaned back skeptical. You don't need to undermine people to win, Jeremy. You're smart. You're creative. You're actually good at what you do. But somewhere along the line, you started believing that stepping on others was the only way to stay relevant. His face froze. His jaw tensed, but he didn't respond. You lost the position, not because I sabotaged you, I continued, but because you underestimated the people around you. You thought no one was watching, that no one could touch you. I leaned in slightly, but people were watching. They just needed someone to stand first. Jeremy let out a dry laugh. So you're a hero now? I shook my head. No, I'm someone who's tired of cleaning up the messes that people like you leave behind. He stared at me for a long moment, and for the first time I saw something flicker in his eyes that wasn't arrogance. It wasn't shame either, but it was close. Maybe regret, maybe fear. I guess I misread you, he muttered. You did, I said, standing. A lot of people did. I left him there with his untouched drink and his forced composure. Back at the office, I didn't tell anyone about the meeting. It wasn't for show, it was for me. Because I needed to say it to know I hadn't let the system change me the way it changed him. As the weeks passed, the strategy team began to settle under my leadership. I introduced a new system of project transparency. Everyone's contributions were tracked, deadlines were respected, no more behind-the-scenes edits, no more erasures of quiet work, and people responded. Megan, the junior strategist, started speaking up more during meetings. Clara came back from leave and rejoined without hesitation. Even some of the designers who had grown cynical began to re-engage. The energy shifted. Not overnight, not with applause, but quietly through trust. And then one morning, I got an email. It was from an old creative director who had left the company 3 years ago. Heard you finally got the chair. You always deserved it. It just took this place long enough to realize that playing fair doesn't mean playing weak. I stared at those words for a while. Playing fair doesn't mean playing weak. Jeremy never learned that, but maybe others would. The first time I signed off as Manager Strategy Division, I sat in my chair long after the office had emptied. The lights were dim, the floor quiet. I thought about every version of me that had sat here before, overworked, undercredited, doubting himself. And I thought about every person who had a Jeremy in their life. Someone who smiled while stealing their work. Someone who made them question their own value. To them I say this: don't shrink, don't disappear, don't wait for permission to defend your worth. You don't have to play dirty to survive. You just have to be sharper than the ones who do. And when the moment comes, when the spotlight finally lands on you, step forward, not as a revenge story, but as proof that honesty can win, even in a world built to reward the liars. I thought it was over. I really did. After everything, the evidence, the confrontation, the shift in leadership, I believed Jeremy would stay buried in the background, a cautionary tale filed away in the quiet corners of office politics. But I was wrong. 2 weeks after our clarity lunch, I received a forwarded email from the finance department. The subject line was harmless enough: invoice irregularities. Need clarification. I opened it, and there it was, Jeremy's name. An attachment showed a project Jeremy had previously helped coordinate months before the Henderson campaign. One of the invoices under his review had been duplicated billed twice under 2 slightly different client job numbers, a 9-200 discrepancy. At first I assumed it was a mistake, a clerical error, something benign. But then I noticed the revision history. Jeremy had manually edited both invoice descriptions, changing the line item code in each so they wouldn't be flagged as duplicates by the system. It wasn't just shady, it was intentional. I sat back in my chair, breath caught in my throat. Because here's the thing, when someone sabotages your presentation, slides, or whispers gossip behind your back, it's unethical but not always illegal. This could be fraud. And now, it was sitting on my desk, under my department's name, my first few weeks as manager. And this was the skeleton waiting in the closet. I reached out to Nancy in finance. Has legal seen this yet? I asked her. She hesitated. Not yet. We wanted to confirm the original approver. Was it me? She checked the system. No, it was Jeremy. But the project is linked to your department's umbrella now. I leaned back in my chair, pulse ticking like a second hand. It would be easy to let this slide, say it was before my time, disavow responsibility. But I knew how that story played out. I called Paul. 15 minutes later, we were in a closed-door meeting. I laid it out, the invoice, changes, the timestamps, the financial risk. Paul listened carefully, then nodded almost grimly. This isn't just internal politics anymore, he said. This could trigger an audit, maybe even legal escalation. I said nothing, because deep down I already knew what came next. Jeremy was called in the next morning. This time I wasn't in the room. I didn't need to be. The next time I saw him, it was through the glass of the HR office. He was pale, silent, sweating. He left that day. No goodbyes, no slamming doors, just silence. By the following week, the agency circulated a vague internal memo. Jeremy Cross is no longer with the company. We thank him for his contributions. And just like that, the man who'd spent years manipulating the system vanished from it without fanfare. Afterward, the office didn't erupt in gossip like I expected. Instead, it was quieter, more focused. People started looking ahead again. Megan approached me during a team sync and said softly, "It finally feels like we can breathe." I nodded, "Keep building, don't look back." But that night, sitting alone at home, I did look back. I thought about every moment I'd questioned myself, every time I let someone else rewrite the truth. And I realized something. Jeremy didn't just lose because I exposed him. He lost because in the end, he believed his survival depended on destroying others. That's the fatal flaw of saboteurs. They never learn how to lead. They only learn how to manipulate. And when the structure shifts, when people stop protecting them, they collapse. Not loudly, but completely. After Jeremy left, something unexpected happened. The silence wasn't awkward. It wasn't heavy. It was clean. You'd think when someone who dominated so much space disappears, there'd be a void. But instead, things just clicked. Projects flowed. Slack messages were faster. Fewer fire drills. No last-minute revisions mysteriously approved behind people's backs. I didn't announce a new era or deliver some dramatic rebranding speech. I just kept showing up, calm, direct, transparent. People noticed, and for the first time since I started here, I felt like I wasn't surviving the job. I was leading it, but still part of me couldn't let it go. Not Jeremy, but the why behind him. Why someone like him lasted so long. Why he felt emboldened to sabotage others. Why no one stopped him sooner. One day, Clara, a UX lead who'd been at the company even longer than me, stayed behind after a team stand-up. "You know," she said, glancing around, "he used to corner people in 1-1s, gaslight them. Say things like, maybe you're too emotional for leadership, or don't take things so personally." I nodded. I'd heard those words too. Clara looked relieved. I thought I was the only one. "You weren't," I said. "He just made you feel like it." That's how they operate people like Jeremy. They isolate. They pick one target at a time. They make you question your version of reality. But once you pull the thread, once you expose the pattern, the whole thing unravels. That's what happened here. He didn't fall because of one misstep. He fell because the illusion broke. And we finally stopped pretending not to see it. A few weeks later, I received an email from Paul. Subject: upcoming leadership forum, your inclusion. He was inviting me to speak at an all-staff session for emerging managers to share my story. Not the gossip, the journey. My first instinct: decline. I wasn't the type to stand on a stage and talk about resilience like it was a TED Talk, but something held me back. Maybe it was Megan, or Clara, or the quiet ones still questioning their worth. So I accepted. The forum was held in a glass-walled conference room overlooking the city. Rows of chairs, bright lights, coffee carts humming in the back. When they handed me the mic, my palms were sweating, but my voice didn't shake. "I'm not here to give a success story," I began. "I'm here to tell you what happens when you're underestimated, undermined, and put in positions that test your values." I saw heads lift. I wasn't promoted because I fought harder. I was promoted because I stopped letting people write my story for me. I paused. Sometimes the most dangerous person in a room isn't the loudest. It's the one smiling while erasing you behind closed doors. And sometimes the only way to win is to document, stay steady, and outlast them. The room was silent, not tense, but thoughtful. Afterward, 3 junior staffers approached me. One whispered, "That's exactly what's happening to my teammate. She's being pushed out." Another said, "No one's ever talked about office manipulation this clearly." And the third, she just nodded and said, "Thanks for not pretending it's easy." I left the forum feeling something I hadn't felt since the beginning of this journey. Agency, not just for myself, but for the people who now knew they weren't alone. This wasn't just about a promotion anymore. It was about shifting a culture, one conversation at a time, one truth at a time. You'd think that once someone like Jeremy was gone, the storm would pass. But that's the thing about storms. They don't just leave. They leave behind debris. The day after I spoke at the leadership forum, Paul called me into his office. "Great job yesterday," he said. "I've had 3 directors ask if you'd mentor their junior staff." I nodded politely, but something in his tone made me pause. Then he added, "Also, just a heads up. Legal wants a few words with you." I blinked. Legal. He held up his hands. Nothing serious, just routine follow-up, part of wrapping up the Jeremy file. Still, that word legal carried a chill I couldn't shake. I walked into the meeting that afternoon with no notes, just clarity. 2 company lawyers, both polite, sat across from me with folders. "Brandon, thanks for coming in," one said. "This won't take long. We're just documenting any knowledge of discrepancies prior to the Henderson campaign." I knew what they were really asking. Did you know Jeremy was committing invoice fraud before it was flagged? And maybe more pointedly, could we have caught this sooner if you'd spoken up earlier? I answered truthfully. I told them everything, when I first suspected something was off, how I began documenting what I didn't know. And I made sure to say what mattered most. I didn't wait because I was scared. I waited because I knew if I accused him without proof, I'd be the one under review. The younger of the 2 lawyers looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "We've heard that before," he said quietly. "More than you think." They released me without issue, but I walked out with something heavier than relief. There were others, other departments, other victims, other people like me who stayed silent because the risk was too high. And Jeremy, he'd just been the most visible of a deeper problem. That realization sat with me for days. Meanwhile, work continued. Projects were picking up speed. My team was performing better than ever. But that didn't stop a creeping anxiety from setting in. Because when you've been sabotaged once, truly deliberately sabotaged, you start watching every shadow, every comment in meetings, every email where you're CC'd last. And sure enough, something surfaced. It was Megan who brought it to me. Hey, I know we have that quarterly report due, but I think someone's tampered with the data set. I turned to her alert. What do you mean? She showed me her screen analytics from a recent campaign. At first glance, they looked normal, but one line of the spreadsheet showed a bounce rate that made no sense. Inflated, deliberately reversed. She continued. I cross-checked it with our GA dashboard. The actual bounce rate was half this. I felt my stomach turn. Who last edited this? System shows. Luke. Luke was a relatively new hire brought in after Jeremy left. Quiet guy, friendly, but he'd come recommended by one of Jeremy's old contacts. I exhaled slowly. The optimist in me hoped it was just a rookie mistake, but I'd learned not to ignore instincts. I invited Luke for coffee. It was a casual ask, no HR, no accusations. We sat at a corner table in the break room. I asked how he was settling in. Good, he said with an easy smile. Team's great. Fast-paced but exciting. Then I eased into it. I noticed a bounce rate discrepancy on the Q3 file. Looks like it was last edited on your profile. His face flickered just a moment, then reset. Oh yeah, that was probably me. I was trying to clean up formatting. Formatting doesn't change metrics. Silence. Luke, I said carefully, you're new. You have time to get your footing. But if you're here thinking Jeremy's rules still apply, let me tell you, now they don't. He looked like he'd been slapped. I didn't mean I wasn't. I'm not asking for excuses. I'm asking for accountability. That's how we lead here. He swallowed and nodded. It won't happen again. I believed him for now. But after that meeting, I implemented something I'd been too hesitant to push before a team-wide audit protocol. Every report, every key metric, dual reviewed before submission. No more silent sabotage. Not on my watch. A few nights later, I stayed late in the office. Everyone else had gone. Just the hum of the vending machine and the quiet clack of my keyboard. I pulled up our internal history logs, not because I didn't trust my team, but because I needed to remind myself what it meant to trust with verification. I clicked through timestamps, edits, access points, and there, like a quiet echo from the past, I saw a single log entry. Jeremy Cross 99 had accessed an old archive folder a day before he left, a folder labeled Draft Strategy Brandon. It wasn't on the main server. It had been archived, hidden. And inside was my original strategic plan for the Q2 pitch. Unedited, unfiltered, stolen. Back then I thought my ideas had vanished. Now I knew the truth. Jeremy hadn't just sabotaged me. He took what I made and pawned it off before he left. My hands tightened into fists. I should have been furious. But instead, I smiled. Because now it didn't matter. Everyone knew what I was capable of. Because I'd shown them without stealing, without scheming. I'd done it on my own. And Jeremy, all he had left was a ghost file in an archive no one would ever see again. There's a strange kind of peace that comes with finally knowing the full scope of someone's betrayal. Not because it hurts less, but because the unknown is gone. The worst has been revealed. And once the truth is out, you can stop bracing for impact. That's how I felt after finding my stolen strategy draft in the archived folder. Jeremy had used it, maybe pitched it as his own, but in the end I had risen. He hadn't, and that knowledge, that truth, was stronger than any stolen credit. Still, I couldn't shake the thought of how close I'd come to losing everything. If I hadn't documented, if I hadn't stood my ground, would anyone have believed me? That night I drove home in silence. No music, no podcasts, just the soft hum of the road and the weight of reflection. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I had made a decision. It was time to create something permanent, something bigger than one story, one promotion, or one sabotage. It was time to build a framework, a blueprint, so that no one else in our company would have to navigate this kind of betrayal alone. The next morning I drafted a proposal, the Integrity Initiative, a company-wide cross-department mentorship and accountability program. Its core pillars: anonymous reporting with response protocols, mentorship between managers and at-risk staff, a review board for major project authorship to prevent credit theft, monthly leadership forums focused on transparency and ethics. I shared the draft with Paul first. His reaction surprised me. He didn't just support it, he offered to sponsor it. This isn't just a good idea, he said. It's necessary. We looped in HR, and by the end of the month, the Integrity Initiative was launched. The first workshop, Toxic Ambition, How to Spot It and Stop It, Guess who volunteered to co-lead it? Clara, the same woman who once whispered about being cornered in 1-1s. Now, she stood beside me in a conference room of 30 staffers speaking with strength I hadn't seen before. "We're not here to name names," she said. "We're here to name patterns." The whole room leaned in. That workshop changed everything. People began coming forward, not in outrage, but in honesty. Stories, incidents, quiet wounds that had festered for too long. We didn't fire anyone. We didn't build a wall of shame. We built a system of accountability, a voice. But growth isn't always comfortable. A month after the initiative launched, I received an anonymous feedback form that shook me. "Brandon is respected but intimidating. People worry about crossing him. Some fear he's become what he once stood against." That one line cut deeper than anything Jeremy had ever done, because it forced me to look inward. Was I intimidating? Had I crossed the line from firm to unapproachable? I thought about the version of me that first walked into this agency, hopeful, quiet, willing to wait his turn. Then I thought about the version of me now, sharper, quicker, no longer naive. Had I become hard out of necessity? Or had I let the system shape me too far? I called a team meeting, and I told them the truth. I read a feedback form, I said. Someone said they found me intimidating, that maybe I've become too guarded. Silence. "I want you to know I'm listening. I haven't forgotten what it feels like to be overlooked. I haven't forgotten what silence costs." Megan spoke up. "I wrote that, and I meant it with respect." I nodded, then "Thank you." Because leadership isn't about being flawless. It's about being teachable. That same week, something else happened. A job posting went live on the company's site, Director of Strategy, Global Expansion. I wasn't surprised. Paul had hinted that higher level roles were coming with the company's growth, but I was surprised by what happened next. People began asking me, "Are you applying? You'd be perfect for it. Please say you're going for it." I'd spent so long fighting for a seat at the table. Now people were pulling out the chair for me, but part of me hesitated. What if the higher I rose, the more I'd have to give up? I wasn't afraid of the challenge. I was afraid of the distance. Would I lose touch with the team? The stories, the real daily truths. I sat with that question for days. Then one night I got a message from Clara. "If you don't apply, someone else will, and they might not care half as much as you do." That sealed it. I submitted my application the next morning, not because I wanted the title, but because I believed in the system I was helping to build and I wanted a louder voice to protect it. I didn't expect to feel nervous, not after everything I'd been through, not after exposing a saboteur, reclaiming my place, building an initiative from scratch. But as I waited outside the executive conference room for my final interview for the Director of Strategy role, my hands were sweating like it was my first day all over again. There's something uniquely humbling about chasing something you once thought was unreachable, and realizing that the only thing between you and it now is you. Paul stepped out of the room and gave me a small nod. "They're ready for you." Inside, a panel of 4 HR2 senior executives and Paul again, but this time he sat back, said nothing. His role now was not to advocate, it was to watch. I sat down, steadying my breath. The first few questions were expected. What's your long-term vision for the department? How do you manage conflict across teams? What sets you apart from the other candidates? I answered honestly, drawing from real experiences. No buzzwords, no over-polished lines. But then came the question that stopped me cold. The senior VP, a woman I'd barely interacted with, leaned forward. "Brandon, we know what you've accomplished here, but tell me this. What's one thing you regret?" Silence. Every instinct told me to pivot, to reframe regret as learning or growth, but I didn't. I told the truth. I regret not speaking up sooner, not when Jeremy sabotaged me, but earlier when I saw him doing it to others. I thought keeping my head down would protect me. It didn't. It just prolonged the damage. She nodded slowly. "And what would you say to someone on your team facing the same situation today?" I'd say this: you're not alone, and your silence doesn't keep you safe, it just keeps you stuck. There was a pause. Then Paul leaned forward. Just one sentence. "Thank you, Brandon." And the interview ended. 3 days passed. No word, no signals. Every time my email pinged, my pulse jumped. Every meeting invite made me wonder. Then Friday morning, a calendar notification appeared. Meeting with executive team, 11:30 a.m. No subject, just a time. I walked in, prepared for either outcome. The SVP, who had asked the hardest question, smiled at me. "Brandon," she said, "we're offering you the role." Just like that. It should have felt like a victory parade. Fireworks, applause. But what I felt was quiet, not empty but centered. I had fought for something real, and I'd earned it not by playing their game, but by rewriting the rules. Word spread fast, Slack pings, handshakes. Even Luke, who had stumbled earlier, walked over and offered a simple congrats, boss. But it was Megan who said what mattered most. About time, she grinned. Now go fix the whole system. I laughed, one policy at a time. That weekend, I visited my parents. It had been months since I last went home. Sitting across from my dad in the kitchen, he asked what I always knew he would. Was it worth it? And for once, I didn't hesitate. Yes, every minute. He nodded, stirring his coffee. Just don't let the title turn you into the kind of man you had to fight to beat. That stuck with me. Because winning doesn't end the risk. Sometimes it starts it. The higher you rise, the easier it is to forget what it felt like to be small. To be silenced, ignored, dismissed. But I couldn't forget because my story wasn't just mine. It belonged to everyone who'd been whispered about in glass offices. Everyone whose credit had been stolen. Everyone who thought keeping quiet was safer. No more. Now I had the seat. Now I had the voice. And I planned to use it. But I returned to work Monday with a calm fire. My first act as director, I instituted the authorship review protocol I had pushed for during the Integrity Initiative, but this time across all departments. Every project would now have transparent contribution logs with peer and manager confirmations. No more invisible labor. No more last-minute credit theft. Some teams grumbled, others celebrated, but the message was clear. This was a new era, one where talent couldn't be buried, where ambition didn't mean sabotage, where silence wasn't the only option. That night, I walked through the office after everyone left. It was quiet, dim, peaceful. I passed the old glass meeting room, the one where Jeremy once humiliated me with a fake presentation deck. I paused, and for the first time in months I opened that door. The chairs were empty now. But in my mind, I saw that day clearly the sting of betrayal, the flush of shame, the certainty I'd never rise again. And then I looked at the empty seat at the head of the table. Mine now, not because I climbed over people, but because I stood through the storm, and made sure no one else would have to do it alone again. The first time I sat in the director's office, the real one-corner glass skyline view, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt reflective. The door clicked shut behind me. I turned slowly in the chair. And in the silence, I thought of everyone who had passed through this building without ever being seen. Not invisible because they had nothing to offer. Invisible because someone louder, shinier, more connected made sure their light was blocked. I had been one of them, and now I had a chance to make sure no one else was. 1 month into my new role, I called an all-hands meeting. No slides, no prepared speech. I stood in front of a room full of people, some excited, some skeptical, and told the truth. I didn't get this title because I played politics. I got it because I played defense for far too long. And I won't let this place keep running on fear, silence, or sabotage. I looked across the rows. Megan nodded. Clara stood in the back, arms crossed but smiling. Luke too. I know some of you are still healing, still wondering who you can trust. Start with yourselves. And if you ever feel like you're being pushed down, you come to me. I meant it, every word. But change isn't just policies and programs. It's people. One afternoon, weeks later, I was reviewing our upcoming campaign calendar when HR pinged me. A new hire just 2 days in had already flagged a concern. He's worried his ideas are being reused by someone on his team, they told me. I asked for names. One of them was a mid-level strategist, a guy I'd barely spoken to. But I didn't ignore it. I set a private meeting, brought them both in. And instead of a confrontation, I led a conversation. I'm not here to point fingers, I said. I'm here to protect clarity. The issue turned out to be a misunderstanding, but the message was sent. We care, we act, we listen. The new hire sent me an email later that night. I've never seen a director step in this fast. Thank you for making this feel safe. That was better than any title. Months passed. The Integrity Initiative became more than a program, it became culture. Other departments started their own mentorship groups. Anonymous reporting went up, not because people were paranoid, but because they finally believed someone would listen. I received invitations to speak at panels, podcasts, even universities. They didn't want to hear about strategy or campaigns. They wanted to hear about surviving betrayal, about what comes after sabotage, about how you rebuild stronger. And I told them the truth every time. You don't rebuild by seeking revenge. You rebuild by becoming the person your past self needed and offering that to someone else. One Friday evening, as I packed up to head out, I found something on my desk. An envelope. No name, just my first initial B. Inside was a folded note. I was one of the people who stayed quiet when you were being undermined. I regret it. I'm trying to be braver now because you showed how it's done. Thank you. No signature, but I didn't need one. It was enough to know that I wasn't walking this road alone anymore. Emotional fade out, 300 words. Looking back, it's surreal to think how close I came to quitting. How close I came to walking away from everything I'd built just because one man couldn't stand to see me succeed. But betrayal doesn't define you. How you respond to it does. I didn't win because I was smarter. I didn't win because I had more connections. I won because I stayed, because I paid attention, because I trusted my instincts when no one else did. And most of all, I refused to become like the person who tried to break me. To those listening now, maybe you're dealing with your own Jeremy. Maybe your ideas are being stolen. Maybe someone's trying to cut you out of something you earned. Here's what I'll say. Document everything. Trust your gut. And never let someone else's insecurity become the reason you shrink. The world doesn't need more silent survivors. It needs leaders who know the taste of betrayal and still choose integrity. So if you're out there right now doubting your value, don't. Your story matters. And one day, someone will sit across from you and say, "You made this place better just by not giving up. Thanks for staying through the end." If you've ever been in a similar situation, I want to hear your story in the comments. And if this resonated with you even a little, do me a favor, like, subscribe, and share this with someone who might need it today. Because here on Ethan's Way, we don't just tell stories, we rewrite endings.